Good morning, Elmira Mennonite Church. Good morning to this Good Friday service. Today we will recognize the death and the suffering and death of Jesus through the symbols of communion. I just want to point out that during the first hymn, you may want to prepare some bread or biscuits or whatever you use for communion and a drink. And that way, after the hymn, we will be ready for the communion service. So now, let's pray. God, your love is so incredible. You came into this world in the person of Jesus to teach us how to live. And then you extended that love all the way to the cross, where you taught us how to suffer and die. And this morning we thank you, we celebrate, and we recognize your love for us with the symbols of communion. And so we are so grateful to be able to gather together, and we just give you thanks in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
When I survey the wondrous cross on which the Prince of Glory died, my richest gain I count but loss, and pour contempt on all my pride. Forbid it, Lord, that I should boast, save in the death of Christ my Lord. All the vain things that charm me most, I sacrifice them to his blood. See from his head, his hands, his feet, sorrow and love flow mingled down. Did e'er such love and sorrow meet, or thorns compose so rich a crown? Were the whole realm of nature mine, that were a present far too small. Love so amazing, so divine, demands my soul, my life, my all.
He took his place at the table, and the apostles with him. And he said to them, I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I tell you, I will not eat it until it is fulfilled in the kingdom of God. Then he took a loaf of bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me.
Pray.
Let's pray. Lord Jesus, what an incredible gift you gave us, the gift of your very self, including your body. And today, through this bread, we recognize your body and celebrate this wonderful gift and say thank you. So Marion, the body of Christ broken for you.
Irv, the body of Christ broken for you.
Okay, there's a break. And he did the same after supper, saying, "This cup poured out for you is the blood of the new covenant." Let's give thanks. Lord Jesus, again we thank you. Thank you for giving your life, your very blood for us, so that we can experience freedom from sin and joy in the life together with you. Thank you so much. Amen. Marion, the blood of Christ shed for you.
Irv, the blood of Christ shed for you.
This
Now, before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to himself, he got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered, "You do not know now what I am doing, but later you will understand." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "One who has bathed does not need to wash except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you." For he knew who was to betray him, and for this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." After he had washed their feet, had put on his robe, and had returned to the table, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example, that you also should do as I have done to you. Very truly I tell you, servants are not greater than their master, nor are messengers greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them."
Deep calls to deep. We have traveled this Lenten journey. We gathered at the gates of joy on Palm Sunday, and we have feasted at the Lord's table. On this Good Friday, we recall the arrest and crucifixion of the innocent Savior. The sorrow that we feel lies heavy upon us. Today, we are deep in the shadows, called deep into the story. We go deep by listening to some of the people who were there. His mother, Mary, the thief on the cross, Mary Magdalene, the boy with loaves and fish, and Judas.
Burned into my mind's eye like I'm still there, still standing in that moment, looking at him as he prayed in the garden. I couldn't have walked away. The lantern light and jangling weapons had already given us away. Then he was walking toward us, and I knew. Oh God, have mercy. I always thought I was the only one of them who really understood who the Messiah was. When I first met him, I was moved by his teachings. These teachings touched somewhere deep inside me. Living in the shadow of a violent and repressive government, as my people had for so long, his words of freedom and wholeness and love opened up a whole new world for us. I am not by nature a passionate, outgoing person like Peter or James or John, but I was able to offer what small gifts I had to this Messiah and his movement. I guess I began to think too much of these gifts. I began to become so controlling. No, Mary, don't you touch him with your hair and perfume. No, James and John, don't go get him a donkey to ride into the city. No, Messiah, do not wash anyone's feet. I went to the high priests. Maybe if I worked with them, I could force the Messiah's hand, make him act like the great king I thought he should be. That's what I told myself, at least. So I sold them out. I sold them out for 30 pieces of silver. And now, all I can see is his face as he turned toward me and saw me leading that band of soldiers. Christ, have mercy.
When I met him, I looked at his hands. My parents said he healed people by touching them, that he had power in his hands. When we went to hear him speak, that's what I wanted to see, his hands. We took all the food we had to sell, just a few barley loaves and 2 fish, but we needed the money. I offered it to Andrew when he came looking for food. But he didn't just buy it from me. He took me right to Jesus. They wanted to buy what we had, our loaves and fish. Jesus asked me to give him what I had, and I put it all in his hands. He broke off. He didn't really look like a miracle worker, just a normal person. I don't know what I expected, but he took the bread in his hands and prayed over it, and then he kept breaking it. He broke off more and more bread from our loaves. He tore pieces off and gave them to his disciples, and they never ran out. Long after all the food should have been gone, Jesus filled basket after basket with bread and fish. Just our bread and fish. He took the little food we had in his hands, and it was enough to feed thousands of people. We went to Jerusalem for the Passover, and Jesus came there too. We didn't make it in time to see him come in on the donkey, but I heard about it. I wish I'd been there. It sounded amazing. Jerusalem still buzzed with news of what Jesus was saying and doing. But this morning, the news was different. People said Jesus had been arrested. He was on trial even before going to Pilate. I wanted to see what happened to him, so we followed the crowd down where he was supposed to be. He got there just in time to see him walking up the hill with his cross. I wouldn't have recognized him. He was so beaten and bloody, he couldn't even carry the cross. They had to get someone to help him. He seemed so broken. We followed the crowd to the hill, and then, I can't. They nailed him to the cross. They stretched out his hands, and they nailed him down to the cross. When they raised the cross where it was standing, that was all I could look at. His hands had made our bread, fed thousands of people. They'd healed blindness and leprosy, and people took his hands and nailed them to the cross. He had power in his hands, and I don't understand why they were broken on the cross.
See from his head, his hands, his feet, sorrow and love flow mingled down. Did e'er such love and sorrow meet, or thorns compose so rich a crown?
Jesus often visited us in our home, and there was nothing I liked more than to sit at his feet and listen to him teach. I could hear whispers sometimes that I shouldn't be there. It wasn't right for a woman to pay attention to what he was saying, but I couldn't get rid of the sorrow that was inside of me. How could I bear it if he went away, or if something happened to him? I loved him. My entire life was wrapped up in his. I didn't want to be like one of the other disciples and tell him that these things couldn't happen. They could happen. They would happen. How could I show him how I felt about him? Show him that I understood? I remembered the perfume that I had. It was the only thing of value that I owned, and I could think of nothing better for my master. So one night, when he was at our home for dinner, I took the perfume and poured it over his feet. His feet. The feet that had walked on water. The smell of the perfume filled the room, and I loved him so much, I would have done anything for him. I let down my hair and began wiping his feet. I could hear whispers then, too, that I shouldn't have wasted the perfume, that I could have sold it and given the money to the poor. I could feel my face burn with shame. Was it wrong of me to show my love for him? But then he spoke. His word at one time had driven demons from my body and my mind, and now his word drove accusations away. But I heard words even I didn't want to hear. My burial. Was I the only one who had heard that? And now, standing at the cross, his mother beside me, I look up at the bleeding and tortured man in front of me. His arms are stretched out as though he could embrace the whole world. His feet are nail-pierced. His feet. The feet I anointed for his burial.
Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they nailed him to the tree?
I was an armed robber. Me and my partner, the guy on the third cross, got caught by a Roman patrol. On the same day that they crucified Jesus, they crucify us. One of us on his left, the other on his right. This isn't any normal crucifixion. Mobs of people are here just because of Jesus. Self-righteous Pharisees are swaggering and mocking. If you're some kind of Messiah, one sneers, come on down from that cross. If you're a savior, save yourself if you can. We're getting exactly what we deserve, but he ain't done nothing wrong. I call over to him, though it's getting hard to breathe, and talking makes it that much harder. He's in bad shape, exhausted, in excruciating pain, back oozing, breath labored. He isn't going to last long. I can see that. But somehow I can see beyond all that. He was the Messiah. He is the Messiah, no matter what those priests and Romans and Pharisees have done to him. Jesus, I call again, quieter now. He opens his eyes, piercing, loving, honest eyes. Jesus, I say, when you come into your kingdom, would you remember me? His words are labored, his lips parched, but I can still hear him pretty well. Truly, I say to you, his voice cracks, then is stronger for a moment. Truly, this very day, you will be with me in paradise. His eyes droop. He's fading quickly now, but I believe him. I do believe him.
There are so many things I wanted to say to you, my son, and I always thought I'd have the time. And now it's nearly too late, so I'll say them now. When I look at you, I see the little baby you were when I held you in my arms the first time. I never told anyone about the day we presented you at the temple. You've heard what the prophet Simeon said about you, that you would be a light for the revelation for the Gentiles and for glory to our people. And you have been, my son. Your kindness to the outcast has drawn people to you, and in you, people have seen the face of God. But it also drew unwanted attention to you, anger and hatred. At times, I wished you'd be a little quieter around the Pharisees, a little more cautious. You could have. You didn't have to provoke. You didn't always have to speak the truth, did you? And yet, I know that in doing that softening your words or backing down would make you a different man. Did I wish you were a different man? How could I want that? You are the hope of Israel, the hope of all humankind. What I never told anyone was that Simeon said a sword would pierce my soul. I never knew what he meant. But I know now, my son. I know now. I always wanted to protect you from pain. I hated every bruise and scrape. But I couldn't stop you from pain when you were little. And I was helpless to protect you from the violence inflicted on you today. I felt every lash that fell on your back. The back I used to wash when you were a little boy. I screamed until my throat was raw at those who hurled awful names at you. The Son whose name I whisper daily in my prayers. I wept when they crushed the crown of thorns on your head, the head that I used to kiss when I tucked you goodnight. But when they drove spikes through your hands, hands that I held as we walked down the road, I felt the sword pierce my soul. I stand now at your cross. There are no miracles this time. The light has gone out of my life, even as it is fading from the sky.
Were you there when the sun refused to shine? Were you there when the sun refused to shine? Sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when the sun refused to shine?
Oh my God. My God, why have you forsaken me? Father, forgive them. for they do not know what they do. It is finished. Father, into your hands I commend my spirit.
Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, and Nicodemus, who had at first come to Jesus by night, took the body of Jesus and wrapped it with spices in linen cloths, according to the burial customs of the Jews. There was a garden in the place where he was crucified, and in the garden there was a new tomb in which no one had ever laid. And so they laid Jesus there.